Twisted Christian, back with the video. Today I'm going to discuss briefly about what this country asked Iraq for. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank you guys for your support on Patreon. This week is going to be a good week for stocks as far as the research that I'm doing. And I'm making sure that every stock that I post on the Patreon, for me, I'm looking for the cheapest best buy. Some of these are high risk. Some of these companies that are operating with the United States, they're in some of the biggest oil reserves, pumping and drilling and searching for oil. So I really think that the U.S. oil market is going to take off, and you're going to find out here over the next 6 months, why that is. And you're going to see a lot more production. You're going to see a lot more exporting of oil, which is going to be good for the United States oil industry. And you guys need to be doing your research and looking for the wells. And that's all that I'm doing, is I'm looking for different wells to invest in. So the link is down below in the description, and it's also up in the corner. It'll pop up, and you guys can check that out. Now, one of the interesting things that I wanted to bring up today was, there's an article here. It says Saudi Arabia asks Iraq for oil. Saudi Arabia has approached Baghdad with a request to buy crude oil from OPEC's number 2 to compensate for its production outage caused by Saturday's attacks. Sources declined to be named told S&P Global Platts. According to one of the sources, Aramco had asked Iraq's state oil marketing organization for some 10 million barrels in Basra Light to load in October and November. The drone and cruise missile attacks on Saudi oil infrastructure removed an estimated 5.7 million barrels per day from its output. Although work is underway to return to normal operation at the fields in the processing facility, it will be a while before this happens. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip down. Yesterday, Energy Minister bin Salman told media that more than half of the lost production has been restored. By the end of September, bin Salman said Saudi Arabia would have 11 million barrels per day in production capacity. By the end of November, it would be 12 million barrels per day. Okay, and I bring that up because I find it interesting that Saudi Arabia, with all its oil, and this is all leading up to something, that they would ask Iraq for oil. Now, this is a good thing for Iraq, right? Because we want Iraq to continue to produce oil, drill for more oil, refine more oil, and all that. The other thing is that once this news report came out, it says here, Saudi Aramco, we never asked Iraq for extra oil. Saudi Arabia's giant Aramco is not looking to buy crude oil from Iraq's state oil marketing firm. People familiar with the operations of the two companies told Bloomberg on Thursday, after early reports that suggested Saudis were seeking to import as much as 20 million barrels of crude oil from Iraq. All right, so, first, when all this happened, Saudi Arabia was like, oh, it's going to knock us out for months and all this and all that. And then they turned around and said, oh, we're not going to need any other country to boost their oil production, any other OPEC company to boost their oil. Then they turn around and ask Iraq for oil. And then they turn around and deny that they asked Iraq for oil. Now, I find this interesting because, like I said, we want Iraq to be one of the main central figures as far as oil and growing their economy and making money. And after, one of the things is that after this attack, this is going to be important for those of you who are going to be investing in the U.S. oil market. All right, and I've been reading different reports about what's going on. And I have an article here that says why the Saudis are lying about their oil production. And basically, without reading the whole thing through, they say one thing and they're doing another, and they say that it's basically their oil production, what they say they claim they can do, is mythical. That they don't have the power, they don't have the resources to put out as much as they say that they can or that they are. And I just, after reading this article, I just want to point out a couple things. One particular striking comment came from Saudi Arabia's new oil minister, Prince bin Salman, just after the attacks. He stated that the kingdom plans to restore its production capacity to 11 million barrels per day by the end of September and recover its full capacity of 12 million barrels per day 2 months later. It's extremely telling that he spoke of capacity and later supply to the market, as these are terms that Saudis tend to use in order to avoid talking about actual production, as capacity and supply are not the same thing at all as actual production at the wellheads, says Energy Aspects Mallinson. What Saudi is trying to do by not revealing the true picture is to protect its reputation as a reliable oil supplier, especially to its target clients in Asia. So we have to take all these comments with a hefty pinch of salt, he said. This country has stated for decades that it has a spare capacity of between 2.2 and 2.5 million barrels per day, implying given the actual production during virtually all this time averaging less than 10 million barrels per day, total production capacity of 12 to 12.5 million barrels per day. This level, though, or anywhere near it, has never been remotely tested, with the highest production ever recorded just over 11 million barrels per day in November last year. This is despite the all-out price war that the Saudis started in 2014 against U.S. shale producers to try to destroy the industry through low prices caused by flooding the markets with oil. If the Saudis had anything near 12 million barrels per day capacity, that would have been the time to pump it, but all managed was just under 10 million barrels per day, with 10.5 million barrels per day managed for just 1 month over that 2-month period before Saudi reversed its strategy. Okay, so the article just goes on, and as far as it's, there's just a lot of questions to Saudi oil. And one of the things I wanted to bring up is this article that came out in 2011. And this is by WIKI Leaks. If you guys remember that, a lot of that stuff was coming out. And this says Saudi Arabia oil reserves overstated. It says the cables, released by WIKI, urge Washington to take seriously a warning from a senior Saudi government oil executive that the kingdom's crude oil's reserves may have been overstated as much as 300 billion barrels, nearly 40%. The revelation comes as the oil price has soared in recent weeks to more than $100 a barrel on the global demand and tensions in the Middle East. Many analysts expect the Saudis and their OPEC cartel partners would pump more oil if rising prices threaten to choke off demand. So, however, Saddad al-Husseini, a geologist and a former head of exploration at the Saudi oil monopoly, met the U.S. consul in Riyadh in November 2007 and told U.S. diplomat that Aramco's 12.5 million barrels a day capacity needed to keep a lid on prices could not be reached. So, just in the article that I just read, it deals with them. There's a lot of, they believe that Saudi Arabia is not telling the truth about their oil production. So what does this mean? At some point, and this was back in 2011, right? So, and then them asking Iraq for oil. So this is telling of what's really going on over there, right? So if they're not telling the truth about their oil, this is going to be good for Iraq, and it's going to be good for the United States oil industry, and it's going to strengthen the United States and Iraq's economy, because down the road at some point, all that about Saudi Arabia and their oil, eventually that's all going to come out, and it's going to catch up with them. So I just find that interesting, and so you guys can be aware, of investing in the U.S. oil markets, but also too the strength. It's going to this what's going on over there. Down the road, it's going to strengthen Iraq and their crude oil production. So if anything happens, Saudi Arabia, Iraq is already right there to step in, and I believe that at some point down the line, you will see Iraq exporting more oil all over the world, especially to its closest partners, China, Russia. If you guys don't know, those China and Russia are all up in Iraq's oil right now. They're actually funding the drilling, they're funding exploration. So they're getting a piece of the action that's going on over there. And just a side note, as I discussed in another article about all these experts saying that the price of barrel was going to go up to $75, $80, $85, $90, $100. That's what they were all saying when this attack occurred. And you know what? It didn't even really come close to the experts. So one of the things when I came across this article is this U.S. shale oil kept prices from surging after attacks on Saudi Arabia. The U.S. shale boom was one of the reasons why oil prices didn't soar to triple digits when more than half of the oil production of the world's top exporter, Saudi Arabia, was knocked offline by attacks in the middle of September. This is the September 14th attacks knocked 5.7 million barrels per day, or 5% of the global oil supply, offline. It says immediately after the attacks, the oil market went to panic mode early last week with prices jumping by the most on record last Monday. Oil prices could test the $80 barrel Brent crude price following the attacks, S&P Global analysts said immediately after the two vital Saudi facilities went offline. However, later in the week, oil prices eased after Saudi Arabia started to insist through official statements and sources that it would fully restore oil supply by the end of September. According to analysts who spoke to Grigori, slowing oil demand growth, soaring U.S. shale production, and assurances that stocks and reserves around the world can meet supply crunches in short term were the key drivers for oil prices to retreat from the initial shock when they had soared 20% in one day. All right, so this is, and I discussed this too before, is that back in the old days, you remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s, and mostly through the last president of the United States administration, anytime there was something going on with the oil, it always kick up the prices, right? So now they don't have that kind of power. Obviously, this would have, if the prices did go to $100 a barrel, this would have been good for, all those there in the Middle East, and may have actually been good for the United States oil industry too as well. But it just goes to show that where the United States stands at as far as oil production, and not only that, where now gas and oil prices are going to be more stabilized, right? It's all going to be about the companies that you invest in. It's all going to be about their profits. It's all going to be about the supply and the demand, and we're going to see a lot of that. I also believe too you're going to see, because this is a Kim Clement well, right? Kim Clement talked about oil, he talked about gas, and so that's why it's important, why I'm focused on this, because I'm trying to find those wells that I can afford to invest in. And there's a lot of companies out there that during the previous administration had dropped dramatically because there was a moratorium on drilling, and they weren't allowing U.S. oil companies to pursue pipelines and everything else through the United States, and now that they are. So you're going to see a major increase in the U.S. oil industry, but you're also going to see stable oil prices because of what we produce, and I think that's a very good thing that this is actually happening. So some of those stocks I've been posting on the Patreon, and so if you guys need to get in, this is going to be the last month that we do it at $1. So you guys need to get in now. And the other people are posting their opinions on some of the things I'm posting, but they're also posting their thoughts and some of the things that they're invested in. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to give a little short report. I got more videos coming, and we'll see you later on this evening. Twisted Christian out.